Okay, in this section, we'd like to talk about some advanced automation techniques. And the first one we'll talk about is trim mode. So you can see on the screen we have some automation on the lead vocals. And halfway through the verse, we'd like a little bit of a lift on the lead vocals. So instead of erasing any automation that's there, we want to enhance it. So we'll pop into trim mode on the track, and you'll see the yellow trim light comes on. Trim is a combined mode, so you need to choose trim latch, trim touch, or trim right, or even trim read, we'll talk about in a minute. In this mode, we're going to go for trim latch. Gil, why don't you wind us halfway through the verse there?
All right, so just very easily do hold the mark in and out buttons under audition, and this will allow us to just move the cursor with the jog wheel right to exactly where we want it to be.
Great. Since we know pretty much we want to go a couple dB up on this, and we want it to happen right from the start, there's a mode we can turn on in the preferences called latch on stop mode. What does that mean, Gil?
Well, basically what that allows us to do, once that preference is turned on, you can actually touch in to a automation parameter in a parked position, and it's basically arming that parameter to write automation as soon as the play command is invoked.
Great. Also, you'll notice here I've got a nice display of the delta, or the amount I'm trimming up. So I've got a delta 2 dB raise on the vocal here. So essentially, as soon as we roll from the spot where we want the trim to start, you're going to see that it's going to be writing.
That's correct.
And I don't have to hold the fader. So here we go. I can auto match that back out just by hitting the auto button. So now graphically, we see a yellow line on the screen, and that represents the trim automation. What if we want to permanently commit that trim, Gil?
Well, that is a mode called coalesce, which basically writes in any trim automation permanently into the track. That's actually done over in the soft keys. So if we actually go into the automation actions, on the fourth page, there is a function over here called coalesce trim. And once the track with the trim is selected, the button will light up saying now that we can actually invoke that command. So we have that selected, we press the coalesce trim automation button, and that writes the trim into the track. You'll notice that all the automation, main volume automation, gets written up. The trim resets itself to 0 at that point.
Excellent. So it committed the changes of the 2 dB rise halfway through the verse, and it kept all the moves, just made them 2 dB louder, essentially,
Correct.
Right? Why don't we talk for a second about another mode that is very useful called trim read?
That's correct. So if we actually put the console into read, and as long as there's no trim data on the track itself, we can, for instance, with these two chorus vocals, we'll put these into trim mode while in read. This allows us to keep and hear the automation playing that's underneath, but without committing anything, we can actually trim these up, say, a dB.
So in other words, it lets you try out your trim moves.
It lets you audition trim modes, and it's also really good for doing versions. So when delivering pop and rock songs, there's going to be the need to do a vocal up, vocal down. So instead of having to commit the automation up a dB and make a mixed pass, then commit the automation down a dB from its original committed mixed pass, we can easily go into trim mode, set these values, do the pass, and then once you're done, you can easily zero the trim automation out and exit trim mode and not have to worry about committing any of that trim automation to the track.
Let's just say, though, hypothetically, you were trimming, say, the snare up and the vocal up in trim read, and you lived with it long enough and you did want to commit it. Could you do that?
Absolutely. You could then, while it was still in the trim mode, select those tracks and go ahead and coalesce.
Excellent. All right, let's move on to our next advanced automation technique, which is preview. So we'll pop out a trim on this track, and preview is a very powerful mode that lets you try out automation changes and then commit them whenever you're ready. So what Gil and I are going to do is in the chorus, we're going to try out a lift, so to speak, on the drum and the guitars. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we want to pop everything back into latch mode here, Gil. So let's do our option latch. Okay. And Gil's going to bring up his guitars in a custom fader zone on the right side of the console.
Now, over here, I'm going to use a mix edit group that we already have built. So, as we've shown earlier, we can press and hold the groups button down. It gives us a list of our groups up top. We can then select the group that we want to view, and then that brings it into view in my custom fader zone on the right side, while Tom still has his view on the left side set up the way he wants it.
I'm going to look at all the drums here. So essentially what we want to do is isolate certain members from automation so that we can try out this lift on the chorus. So we're going to go into actions mode, and the first page gives us preview, punch preview, and preview suspend. We're going to turn on preview by selecting it there on the soft key menu. Now, anything we touch will be isolated from automation. So let's roll the transport and try to get our lift on the drums. I think I'm going to try level changes and some reverb additions. So here we go.
Okay.
I'm going to bring up the room mics and the overheads.
I'm actually going to bring up the lead guitars and actually bring in the panning since there's only one at a time. Bring those a little bit closer. And I'm going to bring up the phaser as well in just the chorus.
Okay, so I've got my faders brought up. I'm going to now add some more reverb on, say, the room mics. And you'll notice any of these faders or knobs that we touch start blinking green. And that shows you they're no longer amber or they're not blinking red. They're blinking green to show that they're isolated from the automation. So let's audition this change.
Okay.
And we can do that using preview suspend. And that allows us to hear what we had before in place with its automation, and then what we're punching in as the new automation state.
All right, so let's go ahead and suspend our preview. This is what we started with.
Now we can keep adding changes to it, and let's suspend it again. There's where we were.
Back in.
I think it works, Gil.
Okay.
So now we're going to want to commit this preview. I say for this first one, let's just do it on the fly.
Okay.
All right? So we're going to roll the transport. This time, instead of hitting preview suspend or anything, Gil's just going to punch it in using punch preview.
All right, so let's roll transport.
Now you'll notice everything that was blinking green is now blinking red and writing. In this case, we're writing volume, send volume, pan, because Gil did some of those pan changes, and I did some send changes and volume changes. At the end of the chorus, we're going to auto-match them all out. Excellent.
All right. Well, we have several other places we might want to make this move. We've got another chorus and an out chorus to actually put this on.
Sounds good.
So if you actually look up here in the soft keys, our punch preview button is still lit, meaning that all the moves that we had done in preview are still in that preview buffer, which allows us now to basically move the cursor downstream, make other selections, and punch that in other locations. So where do you want to go ahead and put this at, Tom?
Well, you're absolutely right. We want this definitely in the second chorus. So why don't we use the jog wheel and scroll down there. And I think only the second chorus, not the bridge.
Okay. A real easy way to quickly make a selection if you have your markers set up at your song positions is to bring up the memory locators in your soft keys section. You can select where you want the end point to be, which is chorus 2. We will then go and hold the shift key down and hit the bridge memory locator, and that will actually make a selection in between both of those at that point.
Interesting. Now, we don't have to select on the tracks that we want these changes to happen.
That's correct, because you're only committing to the automation anything that was in preview while we were in that mode. So everything else around it that was just reading automation is going to be untouched by this punch.
Excellent. So now, do we have to sit here and roll through this, Gil?
Absolutely not. We can do this in a park state because we have latch on stop on. When we punch our preview here in the stop state, you'll notice that everything that we were writing before starts to blink red. And instead of actually rolling transport over this, we can just, in a park state, punch the auto write to all button.
Okay.
Now that has actually been committed over just that selection.
I'm feeling skeptical. Can we actually confirm that?
Sure. So let's actually roll back here a couple of measures, and we'll play the lead in to the second chorus.
Another way to sort of confirm that, Gil, is actually to do our trick with Control-Command and touch the volumes on some of those tracks that we've been automating on, and you'll see those breakpoints exist between the chorus and the bridge.
So there is one more location we need to put this, correct?
Correct. I think it's from the second bridge to the end of the song.
All right, so let's go ahead and select that. Let's move our selection down here, and then we're going to hold the Mark Out button in Audition and just quickly make a selection out.
Okay.
We will then go back and punch Preview and write to all. And that quick, we're able to write and commit those changes.
Excellent. Hope you can see how extremely powerful Preview mode is.